Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray, and you're listening to the Ranks FC podcast.
Hello Ranks Squad and welcome to Champions League Takeaway here on Ranks FC. It's the final Champions League takeaway of the inaugural group stage of the Champions League, and there was drama galore as 18 games took place at the same time, 16 of them with something riding on them. We're here to break down all of the action from a mad Wednesday in the Champions League. My name is Jack Collins and I'll be your host today. And joining me across the water from San Diego, it's Mr. Dean Jones. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. I guess I'm kind of pleased that that's happened in the middle of the day for me rather than last thing at night. Be hard to go to bed after this, I think, if you're still buzzing from that. Luckily for you, I mean, you stay awake till about 3 a.m, so you don't have that issue.
I have to. Someone has to edit this.
Yeah, so you don't have that issue. But, well, that's pretty wild, mate. But it was fun.
Well, they were calling it Manic Matchday, I think, or the Matchday of Mayhem on CBS, I saw in the United States.
I mean, it was so American. I mean, this whole format was shown today to be very Americanized, I thought. The drama of it, the kind of format of the tables and the kind of automatics and then the playoffs and then the elimination zone, all these kinds of things. It's like there's this ongoing talk about one day the Champions League final will be played in America. And honestly, I see things like this and I'm like, it just feels like it's heading, that it's going to happen one day because it's becoming more and more a thing over here. Obviously, I've had CBS on today. I can't say I'm the biggest fan of the Galazzo show, but it was frantic, absolutely frantic. I mean, that studio is on fire, I imagine, right now, the amount of talking that they've just done. But yeah, it was mad, mate. But mainly I was keeping an eye on Manchester City. And
yeah,
they just about got there.
Hey, they got the job done just in the end. It was lots of fun. I think I had 7 screens, which might be a new record.
How? What were the 7 screens?
So I had 2 phones, Lucy's iPad, Lucy's laptop, my 2 laptops, and the TV. And it was all just everywhere, games everywhere. And yeah, I kept an eye on quite a lot of the fun that was going on. One of them had the goal show. Actually, I thought the TNT goal show was very, very good today. Very, very well presented. Very good guests in studio, Karen Carney, Ali McCoist, and James Horncastle in there. And I thought it was very, very well done. Nothing too overblown, cutting to the games at the right times. They couldn't have a reporter on the ground like they normally do in the goal show, but I thought it was very well put together. And I enjoyed it immensely. So some shouts out to the TNT coverage, even if you didn't enjoy the CBS version quite as much. But no, I read a piece from Rory Smith just before we get stuck into the action this morning. And it was basically like, the Champions League kind of want this to become one of the cornerstones of the football calendar. And obviously we have these kind of landmarks. And in the piece, he calls them like football's bank holidays. It's Saints' days, the transfer deadline day at the end of each window. And, bear in mind that when the transfer window was implemented, no one really paid that much attention to deadline day. Only a couple of moves happening that came on. And, 5-6 years down the line, there was full-on Sky Sports broadcast. There was yellow ties. It became one of the cornerstones of the footballing calendar. We've talked about FA Cup third round weekend, which maybe has been a little bit kind of diluted by the fact that games are no longer all on a weekend. They're stretched out from sort of Thursday to Monday. But I think that there is a sense that this last day of the Champions League could well become its very own kind of moment in the calendar. And we saw the kind of first signs of that tonight, I thought. It was incredibly dramatic across a lot of different things. And, we saw the pictures of teams huddled around their phones at the end to make sure that they'd done enough and see what the other results were that were affecting them. I thought it was interesting, if nothing else. But I did want to start the Etihad, where Manchester City got the job done, 3-1 win over Club Brugge in the end. Both teams qualified. Even a loss wasn't enough to knock Brugge out. So everyone happy at the end. There was a nice touch from City. They actually put the congratulations message up on the big screens in Flemish. And I thought that was kind of touch for the Club Brugge fans who were there still celebrating towards the end. But I think there was more relief than joy at the end at the Etihad from a City persuasion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how they'd have felt about that sign going up if Man City had not made it and Brugge had. That would have been.
I don't think they would have done that.
That would have been
Really
interesting. I don't know why City still need a wake-up call. I don't know why they can't go and set the tone of games like this, but they didn't. People would have looked at the possession stats and stuff like that, and think, oh, City are in control. And I mean, I guess in some respect you could say they're in control because they've got the ball, but they weren't really doing a lot with it, and there was no real attacking threat that came from it. And then Brugge started to build themselves as the first half went on towards taking the lead. And it was actually no real surprise when they did. I mean, Mateus Nunes, I had no idea why this guy's still playing right back, but he was, and he was turned inside out. I think Nunes has done a really good job for Pep. He's done a good job for him, but we are probably at the stage where he doesn't need to be there anymore. Like Man City haven't actually got that many injuries anymore. And he's still playing there, and he got absolutely skinned. And yeah, they've gone 1-0 up, and it was a good finish, to be fair. So at that stage, you're kind of thinking, oh my goodness, surely they're not going to do this. And the only real optimism that they could get back into it is the fact that there was so long to go. And it was like, okay, if they can get a goal early enough, then they'll be okay. The sub at half-time, Gundogan off, Savio on, kind of changed things a little bit in terms of that intent. But ultimately, Brugge just shot themselves in the foot because they left a gaping hole in their midfield and didn't shut Kovacic down, and he's able to just charge with the ball from the halfway line and just plant one in the bottom corner of the net.
Lovely finish.
And then it's a good finish, yeah. It's a good finish. Should never be allowed, obviously, that much space in the first place. The Brugge will be kicking themselves over that when they've done so much work to keep those areas tight. And then on the second one, they've allowed Gvardiol that space down that little channel that he absolutely loves. He's one of the most dangerous fullbacks, actually, in the game right now, Gvardiol. It's not his goal. It's an own goal. He's fired it across the 6-yard box, and the defender's in that situation whereby you can't get it right, really. You've got to try and get something on it because you know that Haaland is lurking in behind you. And he's just got a toe on it and stuck it into his own net.
It was a shame. He played really well up to that point, I thought.
Yeah, he did a good job. They all did a good job, to be honest. Brugge come out of that one with their heads held high and a lot of respect. And, they've actually, I'll be honest, I think Brugge have got a better chance of making it through to the actual next phase of the Champions League, mate. Because you look at the playoffs now, Man City will play either Real Madrid or Bayern Munich, and Brugge will play either Atalanta or Dortmund. And I don't give City much chance at all of winning against either of those teams. I mean, there is this situation now whereby they can add 3 players to the European squad. So obviously that helps, seeing as they've just signed a load of new players, and there's probably 1 or 2 still to come this week. Most telling will be the addition of Marmoush. But yeah, let's see what they are capable of, because if you look at it right now, there's no way I can see this Man City team over 2 legs, especially. Maybe if there's a one-off game, I could see them winning one. But over 2 legs against Real Madrid or Bayern, I can't see it.
With the second leg away from home as well, probably worth pointing out at this stage, because they'll be the unseeded, in inverted commas, team in this one. Look, I think that something we can learn today is why Man City are willing to spend this much money on Andrea Cambiasso, because they need help at fullback. And whilst he has been, I hesitate to say primarily, but I often think that he's been most effective at left back. He is very much dual-footed, can play on either side. I think that gives them options at fullback, which they just don't really have right now. And, when we were talking about the players they were signing, Kuznov, an incredible talent, as we say, Vitor Reis, we know less about, obviously, but, the reports out of Palmeiras suggest that he's a top talent, but maybe not one for right now. Marmoush is someone who can come in and impact things immediately. You'd imagine that if City are going to get 1 or 2 more players in these final days of the transfer window, they're going to be players who can make an immediate impact. Andrea Cambiasso is one of those. And you'd also imagine that if they do bring in a centre midfielder, that will be the third person that gets added to this squad, because they have more depth at centre-back than they have at full-back at this point. And I think that's telling when you're seeing Mateus in there and getting skinned. in the way that he did here. But look, City got the job done, and that's what mattered. Pep Guardiola speaking beforehand, there was an interviewer who asked, what would it mean if, would it be embarrassing if City got knocked out? And he basically was like, we're not going to talk about that. I thank you for your concern, but you can ask me that if we lose this game. And 1-0 down at half time, and there were opportunities for Brugge, not just a 1-0 up, but also then at 1-1. They had a really good spell at 1-1 when City sort of took their foot off the gas, and you're thinking, you haven't won this yet. You need to go and win the game. And Christos Solis, who had a really good game, I thought, another one in a Brugge shirt, a former Norwich City player, but has been excellent for Greece when I've seen them play as well. I thought he was unlucky not to get on the score sheet, and ultimately he was a little bit, in the second half, slightly wasteful with a couple of chances that you kind of expect him to do a little bit better with. So City, I do think got away with one, but they did eventually stamp their control on this from the point where they went 2-1 up. And at that moment, it did feel you're like, okay, everyone can breathe a huge sigh of relief at the Etihad, and City progress. Although, as you say, for how much longer, we don't know. I think it's going to be interesting. If they get Bayern, I think there's a chance. I do think there's a chance, because I don't think this Bayern side have hit their full groove yet. And in bigger games, they've shown that they can be opened up. But if they get Real Madrid, I think that's going to be very, very difficult.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's exciting. And I mean, it's certainly made this period of the Champions League more interesting. And yeah, obviously none of us really knew what we were getting when we saw this big league open up. But in the end, there's no high profile casualties at this stage, but we are going to see one or two coming up.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest that RB Leipzig are a relatively high profile casualty. This is a team.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of anyone cares, like nobody really cares about RB Leipzig because people don't generally like Red Bull teams. But that's I take your point.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it was interesting across the board, but one of these big ones was the race for the top 8. And I wanted to go to Villa Park next because they won 4-2 against Celtic, which sounds relatively comfortable. It was not comfortable, Dean, by any stretch of the imagination. So bear in mind that Villa go 2-0 up within 5 minutes of this game kicking off, and it's the Morgan Rogers show. 2 goals, space of 4 minutes. He actually gets the late one to seal it, the hat-trick ball, which is a major moment for him. But what I thought was interesting is that all the chat beforehand was about the strikers who potentially want out or that Villa could sell, right? In terms of John Duran, who's linked with a move to Saudi Arabia pretty imminently, and that seems to be gathering pace. And then a big bid from Arsenal for Ollie Watkins' services. Watkins was a boyhood Arsenal fan. This is pretty well documented. But also, he's 29 years old, and I wonder if there is an element with Villa where they're going, if we're getting 60, 70 million pounds for him at that age, 30 in December, is this the last time we're going to get an opportunity to cash in on a player? Now, whether they have the potential then to go and replace him, whether there are going to be players that come in that would fill those roles if both strikers leave. All of these are questions, I think, for the transfer window going forward. So I'm not necessarily going to address all that, but guess who steps up? It's Morgan Rogers, who, yes, is sort of this kind of mix between a 10 and a 9 in some ways, but whose goal scoring form takes a huge upturn for the better here. He's been excellent all season, I think, Morgan Rogers, but there is also this question mark over whether he is a midfielder, whether he's a number 10, or whether he wants to play in that forward line and you get him as close to goal as possible. Tonight, he was as close to goal as possible and he bags a Champions League hat-trick. So that was a big bonus for Unai Emery, I imagine, when all the chat beforehand was about Watkins and Duran.
Yeah, I've actually just seen some quotes, and Unai Emery is actually really praising of Boubacar Kamara as well. He's like going out of his way to make sure that this guy's getting praised. So obviously I haven't seen this game, but I just keep seeing quotes flash up on my phone as we're sat here from Emery, making sure, he's like, you guys need to make sure you're also talking about Kamara. So his defensive display seems to have gone down pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting one because Villa won the midfield battle for the first 20, 25 minutes of this really heavily. And in the second half, with Celtic really pushing at 2-2, they battled really hard defensively and ended up going on and winning the game. And there was a couple of real turning points, I thought, in it. Huge credit to Alistair Johnston, the Canadian Celtic right back. His block off the line from Ollie Watkins, who pokes the ball and it looks like it's going in for, to all intents and purposes. And as Johnson gets back across and clears it off the line, it completely changes the course of the game. And within 5 minutes, Celtic are level. So Adam Ida, who takes over from Kyogo, who obviously left, a couple of days ago, and everyone was very, very sad about that at Celtic Park. But he gets this opportunity to start, and he hasn't started all that many games over the course of this season because Kyogo was the main striker. He makes his case that Celtic don't necessarily need that replacement. He's already there. Two really good finishes. The first one, a sort of hooked one across his shoulder, really, really impressive, just in terms of the athleticism to get the ball up. And then 2 minutes later, he's there to sweep the ball home. Brilliant second goal from Celtic. The ball in behind from Arne Engels is sublime. Sublime. One touch, backwards little flick to open up this Villa defence. And suddenly it's level, right? And Celtic take the initiative in the second half at 2-2. And then they get stung on the counter in quite an ironic moment, really. Really clever from Morgan Rogers. Sets up Watkins for the third. Then Watkins misses a penalty. And I don't know if you've seen this yet, but it is a full-on David Beckham, John Terry style slip. His left foot just completely goes from under and he just spoons the ball over the bar. And what was weird is that in the build-up, John McGinn had been trying to protect the penalty spot a little bit and actually had just stood on it loads of times. Like he wasn't able to stop himself standing on the penalty spot. And then suddenly the ground goes from under Watkins. You got to feel for him a little bit. If he hadn't already scored, I think that would have been a real moment considering all the discourse and whatever. But he does really well in the final minutes to pick the ball up in the Celtic, or the pressure in the Celtic box that ends up winning the ball. He pulls it back across for Morgan Rogers to get his hat trick, and some really nice composure from both of them to actually call game on this one. But yeah, it was a really good game. Celtic, some real... I thought kind of power and responsibility to take the game from 2-0 down after 4 minutes. You're thinking, is this going to be damage limitation? Is this going to be control for the rest of the game just to make sure you don't get absolutely hammered and move further down the table in terms of goal difference and all of those things? And instead they put up a really good fight. And bear in mind, this is a Celtic side that were absolutely trounced away from home by Borussia Dortmund in the second game of this group stage. And they go the week after that and they go to Atalanta or they go to Bergamo and they get this 0-0 draw. And since that moment, there's been a real kind of switch in mentality, I think, from Celtic, that they have the capacity to go and fight with anyone. We knew that was going to happen at Celtic Park, I think, but away from home has been where it's been really dark for Celtic. And yes, they end up losing this game, but I thought the maturity and the resilience that they showed in fighting for it and, only basically being ruled out of the game right at the end with that last Morgan Rogers goal was a real step forward in terms of what we've seen from them. And yes, they have the same job as Man City. They will play the other one of Real Madrid and Bayern Munich. And you'd be very, very surprised if Celtic came out of that tie alive. But I will say this, that when those two teams go to Celtic Park first, or whichever of those two teams goes to Celtic Park first, they're going to find a Celtic team that are not ready to roll over as they have done in recent years. And I think that's a major improvement from Brendan Rodgers already.
Yeah, definitely the case. But yeah, fair play to both of these teams for the way that they've applied themselves in the Champions League, and to Villa for actually making it into this top 8 in the end, which, it wasn't an easy task by any stretch of the imagination, even on this match day. And obviously, Rodgers, we should probably give him a bit more credit. I mean, there's 3 Champions League hat-tricks today. Ousmane Dembele, you're not surprised about. Lautaro Martinez, you're not surprised about. But Morgan Rogers, well done, mate, for getting a Champions League hat-trick.
Yeah, really, really impressive. He was unplayable for periods of this game, and a major star in the making, I think, from a Villa perspective. Earlier in the day, you're looking at that and thinking, Duran could go, Watkins could go, who's going to step up for this team? And I'm sure that Villa will bring in replacements if that was to happen. I don't think it will, for what it's worth. I don't think both of them will go. But, Rodgers standing up and being like, I'm here, lads. Don't worry about it. Like, I've got this. I have this in hand. It's something that I think Villa fans can take great heart from. It was a really, really impressive performance. And listening to Stilian Petrov speak about him after the game was quite something. The praise he lavished upon Morgan Rogers was very, very exciting. So I think that it's just the start of the Morgan Rogers story, but this was, a hell of a way to make your statement on the biggest of stages. You talked about Dembele's hat-trick there. One of the games that had loads riding on it was Stuttgart against PSG, because whilst PSG's win over City last week felt like it put them in pole position to qualify, it wasn't a done deal, and Stuttgart were fighting for their lives as well. PSG win this game 4-1 in Germany, and it was absolutely stunning from Lucho's side. They were irresistible first half. And the fluidity of their front three without a recognised number 9, far too much for Stuttgart, which looks so much better. And look, Stuttgart are absolutely no mugs. They've worked themselves back into the Champions League conversation in the Bundesliga. They've had some really impressive performances in this competition, but they just couldn't cope with Barcola, Dembele and Zere Doué, who played really, really well as well. But Barcola's form has been absolutely unreal since they were first linked with Kvaratskhelia Kvaratskhelia. Now, Kvara is obviously now at the club and will be added into this mix going forward as PSG get into the knockout stages. But I just thought that Barcola clearly had a fire lit under him by that move. And he's like, I'm not giving up this spot very easily. And look, Lucio's going to have some work to do to try and drop any of those three with the way that they went about their business today. The flick on from Doué for the first goal from Barcola is absurd. The ball from Barcola to Dembele for their second is fantastic. They were brilliant. And look, this is Ousmane Dembele's absolute unplayable best. What a hat-trick. The third goal that PSG scored, which is Dembele's second, is just sublime. Like, he just beats a couple of players and just rifles one in from sort of the corner of box where kind of, and it's just an outrageous strike that so few players in world football could do. And you know, when you watch him like this, you're thinking, okay, this is another reason why people wanted to sign you. Barcelona signed you for the fee that they did. For PSG signed you for the fee that they did. And I think that, you know, if he's happy and playing well, PSG have a chance against absolutely anybody. Like, he was just sublime throughout the entire game. Stuttgart fought hard. They got one back towards the end, but PSG just way too good here. And I tell you what, don't write them off just yet. Like, when a couple of weeks ago, that early season shout that I had that PSG could go far in the competition and that this under Lucho is going to look a little bit different. Under Lucho without Mbappe, there's going to be a bit more of a feel about this side. But in the last 2 weeks, I feel like we've got to a point where we're realising why again.
Yeah, I mean, they've got a really nice playoff setup here that, you know, we're going to definitely have an all-French tie for PSG as they'll play against Monaco or Brest. I mean, it's important that we point out the importance of Dembele. I mean, in that Man City game, he didn't come on until half-time, and then he came on at the break, and he kind of made the breakthrough for them. So he got that 45 minutes against Man City, scored a goal that led to the win. And then in this game against Stuttgart, he's played the full 90 and bagged a hat-trick. In between, he's even scored as well domestically, scored in a 1-1 draw. So he's really in great form at the moment. It was interesting to hear Thierry Henry speaking after the game. He couldn't find enough like superlatives for the guy. And obviously, like, Henry knows a good forward when he sees one, and he could see that he had a lot of enjoyment in seeing the way that he's managing to live up to the hype. You can make your own decision on whether you think he has totally, but he is right now. But the thing, you know, that's really making PSG tick, mate, is João Neves and Vitinha. Like, they are so good, and they're so
Portuguese
in control.
heart, the Parisian side.
Honestly, like, they are so small yet so big in terms of the presence and the mark they make on a game. And Vitinha has made some controversial-ish comments by saying that this version of PSG is better equipped because they're more of a team. And I think he's being proven right. You know, like, sometimes you've got to speak the truth, and this team is starting to look like a better team than when they had all the superstar giants.
The only thing to keep an eye on for PSG is that they're part of the bracket, because they're sort of the middle bracket. They're the one that will end up playing first or second seed. So even if they win their tie, which, you know, we don't know what that is yet, they will end up with one of Barcelona or Liverpool. So keep an eye on things from that perspective, because if they do get through this,
I don't think that's that big a deal, to be honest. I don't think there's that much difference between them and Barcelona or Liverpool on their day, like, considering the performances we've just seen from them.
No. I agree with you.
So I quite like that they're going to be given a test like that. I think it'll be good for them.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And look, I think it's going to be very interesting. One thing to keep an eye on, and I was going to keep this for the Brest bit, but you may as well do it now, is that if they were to get Brest in the next round, Brest have been talking about, you know, the Stadium Guingamp is not going to be big enough for them to play a Champions League playoff tie, so they've been looking at other options. one of the options they've been looking at is the Stade de France, which is obviously in Saint-Denis in Paris. So there is a chance that PSG play Brest and both legs are in Paris, which I think would be quite unfair in some ways. So just one to keep an eye on, but I thought it was interesting. All right, we're going to take one more before we take a break. And I wanted to go to Catalonia, where Barcelona drew 2-2 with Atalanta. This was the game I was most looking forward to tonight. And I think it delivered really well in terms of a good game of football, well played out game of football between two obviously really good sides. So the first half ends 0-0. But I didn't think it had, because Atalanta scored. Zappacosta scored towards the end of the half. And obviously I was watching lots of games at the same time. And it got to start the second half and I was like, oh, goal Barcelona. I was like, oh, interesting, 1-1. So I sort of like turned to look at that screen and it was like, the breakthrough has come. And I was, hang on, what? So I had no idea that Atalanta's opener had been ruled out. I thought it looked absolutely fine on the replays. It must have taken ages on the VAR to ultimately rule that one out, because I watched all the replays and I was like, yep, fair enough. That looks like a perfectly reasonable goal. So, you know, it's one of those that sprung into life in the second half. I thought Atalanta deserved their lead because they were very much the better side with the better chances in the first half in terms of creating clear goal-scoring opportunities. But Barcelona came out firing at the start of the second half. And the goal they score, the ball across from Rafinha, so good. And then it goes to Lamine Yamal. He takes his touch around the keeper, has the strength to hold off a defender, just as good. And then the game goes mad, right? Like, I mean, one, how do you keep that Barcelona forward line out? I don't know. I don't think anybody knows at the moment. But Atalanta do not break. And I think this is really interesting. They score a gorgeous equaliser from Ederson. Absolutely stunning. I mean, he dances around a couple of players and then sort of no backlift, whacks one into the bottom corner. Really, really good strike. And then Barcelona, a couple of minutes later, take the lead again. Nice to see Ronald Araujo back on the score sheet. I have no idea what Atalanta are doing at the corner. Like, they just leave him completely and utterly unmarked at the back stick, and he just goes, thanks very much, stoops and heads it in. So no idea what they're doing in terms of set pieces, but they work another really good equaliser. Great ball from De Roon, tidy finish from Pasalic on the stretch, and it ends 2-2. It's not enough to get Atalanta into the top 8, a goal and towards the end, and it was a bit ping-pongy at the end, and then there was all sorts of delays. There was a stretcher on the pitch, injured players, everything. And Atalanta are pushing for this goal. And then last minute, Rafinha gets a free kick. And you're like, actually, if Barcelona score here, they're going to go top of this thing. Now, it doesn't really make any difference if you finish first or second. And Arne Slot
prize money
about
it does,
that.
Slightly.
The prize money it does. But in terms of actually where you're at, I reckon in 3-4 years' time, it will matter. I reckon you'll get some sort of trophy for finishing top of the league stage. Like a supporters shield kind of vibe.
Oh, my God.
I just think it won't be called the Supporters Shield, but I'd be very surprised.
Right. You're bang on. That will happen. Yeah, I was actually surprised 100%. When I was looking at it, and obviously there was a chance Barcelona might go ahead of Liverpool, but I did think for a second. I was like, oh, Liverpool win the league, and I was like, oh, does that count? Like, are you like Champions League winners, group stage winners? Like, is there a title that comes with this? There's not, but. You're right.
But like the Bundesliga has winter champions, right? Like you win a little thing for being the winter champions. There's something in it. It's not just an American construct.
There's too much scope to not do it for them to ignore that, and I'm sure they can get massive advertising out of it as well. So I'm so cynical, Anna.
Yeah, so cynical, but it is what it is. But yeah, look, really, really good game between two very good sides. Atalanta will go into the playoffs now, as we mentioned, and it's going to be interesting if they get Sporting or Brugge. You'd imagine that both Sporting and Brugge are going to be begging for Borussia Dortmund right now, managerless Borussia Dortmund, rather than an Atalanta side who are very, very unlucky not to end up in the top 8 and have performed really well over the course, I think, of this league stage. So no one's going to really want to face them. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how that one goes because they're top of the seeded bit. They therefore get the bottom of the bit ahead if they progress, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. So if they were to progress, they get Lille or Aston Villa. And I imagine if you were Atalanta, you would fancy that far more than you would fancy ending up against a Liverpool or a Barcelona, for example. Sure. So, I mean, a route could well open up to the quarterfinals for this Atalanta side. And I don't think anyone is going to fancy playing them, generally across the board because they're such a well put together side. And I thought they showed that again today against Barcelona.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm glad that like we've got at least a league table here with some traditional shape and sense to it. Like I know like this format has been a bit confusing, but when you look at this, it's the first time we've seen it. And the top two teams are Liverpool and Barcelona. It gives it that feel of European pedigree, and it makes you feel a bit better about it all.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Right, we're going to take a break there. When we come back, we're going to round up the rest of the action. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Champions League Takeaway here on Ranks FC, where it's time to take a look through all of the other games that happened tonight. Dean, where do you want to go first with this? Because there's a lot to get through.
Yeah, I reckon give you a bit about Arsenal, because as everything was going on, and even in the chats after the game that I've seen, Arsenal is not one that I've had much insight on. So if you know anything on Girona 1, Arsenal 2, then I would like to know a couple of bits about it.
Okay, well, let's fill you in. So Arsenal dominate the opening exchanges of this game and then somehow go 1-0 behind. The opening goal from Girona, which is scored by Anna Janjuma, who obviously is a former Spurs player, was completely and utterly ridiculous and completely against the run of play. So he gets played through and he looks like he might be offside, but ultimately he is, it is shown that he isn't offside. Gabriel's playing him on. And Neto is about 30 yards out of his goal. Like he is in one of the weirdest positions I've ever seen for a goalkeeper. And it wasn't like Arsenal had the ball and he was potentially going to be utilised as part of the build-up play. Like Girona just had the ball, like with their centre-backs, and one ball sets Danjuma away down the flank. And Neto is, outside of his box, completely stranded. So first time, Danjuma just strikes it around the keeper and it goes in. Neto tries to save it. Like outside the box, it's his debut for Arsenal, and he dives at it, and thankfully for him, he doesn't save it. It goes into the back of the net. He's the oldest debutant ever for
that
Arsenal.
Funny.
Yeah, I got that today, and I have no idea where on earth he's going, mate. Like it is absolutely bizarre. He's in the weirdest position I think I've ever seen from a goalkeeper in that situation.
Oh, I'm looking forward to seeing this.
It's not like he races out either. He's just stood there. Like, it's just it defies belief. Absolute nutter. No idea why. But Arsenal get their way back into this. They win a penalty, which Jorginho dispatches with the old classic stutter step, which is nice to see back in business. And then they take the lead, and it's Ethan Nwaneri. And Dean, I can't express this to you enough. He scores the Bukayo Saka goal.
Oh,
the actual Bukayo Saka goal. He gets the ball on the sort of edge of box and the kind of corner element of the box. And he jinks inside, jinks an extra player, and then curls it into the far corner. It's the most Bukayo Saka goal I've ever seen. And I don't mean it in terms of just curling one into the far corner, because there are players who did that before Saka, and I wouldn't, we'd call that the Iron Robber, right? That it's not.
We
know
what you mean.
It's the fact you have to sort of duke two players en route in order to actually get there. He's sort of going backwards away from goal at the time he does it. It's a glorious, glorious strike. I really, really enjoyed it. And I was sat on the sofa with Lucy, and the goal went in, and I just jumped up and shouted, Saka, Saka. And it was one of those moments you're like, oh my God, it's amazing. They've actually built the regen, and what a talent. He had a really, really good game. And I really enjoyed watching him play. But it was that moment that you just watched up and you're like, oh my God, I've just seen it. That is what they've been trained to do. That is the exact goal. So I was delighted for Nwaneri, obviously, to get his goal, but more so that it was that exact goal. And then Arsenal have a chance to make it 3-1. They actually do concede, and Christian Stuani scores, which would be an amazing story for Girona. He's, the club captain and has scored more goals for the club than anybody else. But the goal is ruled out after a VAR check for offside, which is a real shame, because that would have been a lovely narrative. But Arsenal get the opportunity in the last minute to seal the victory, and Jorginho's gone off. They get a penalty. Raheem Sterling steps up. And do you know what's really annoying? He played really well. I thought he looked much sharper, much brighter. And then he puts the penalty really weakly to his right, keeper's left, keeper dives across Paul Lopez and saves it. And I wonder if that will just knock all of that confidence out of him all over again, because he'd done well enough in this game to suggest that maybe there was something going forward. And then you see that and you're like, oh no, not again. We know where this can go. So I was upset for him. It didn't matter in the end in terms of results. So maybe that's something that they'll cling on to in that regard. But it was really disappointing, because he probably deserved a goal for his performance.
I saw I'd missed it. It's sad, but he's the dad of the team. He's more there for like chats these days. I think when you got these young lads, when you got Miles Skelly, when you got Nwaneri, you need to give these lads a bit of guidance. Raz is your man. He's been there, done it all. So maybe if he's not making the impact on the pitch, even in those big moments, maybe he's doing it off the pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, they got the win and they cruised comfortably to third spot, and they'll be relatively happy, I think, with that Arsenal, considering this was a tougher game than maybe people had given it credit for, even with Girona missing a fair few players. It wasn't as tough as Liverpool's trip to Eindhoven, because they lost 3-2 to PSV. Now, I don't know how much you've seen of the lineup that Liverpool put out,
I've seen it.
But if you actually look at what Arne Slot said before the game, he basically came out and was like, resting my players is more important than finishing first in the Champions League table. He was like, actually, there's no difference between finishing first and second. And I was like, okay, it was quite a bold statement, but all right. I wonder what he puts out. Wow, he really went for the rotations. Kevin Keller in goal, Simicast at left back, Andy Robertson at left centre back, Jarrell Quansah next to him, Connor Bradley at right back, James McConnell played with Harvey Elliott and Wataru Endo in the middle. Cody Hakpo played, apparently because he demanded to play against his former club. Yeah. Jayden Danns played as the number 9 and Federico Chiesa played on the right. First off, Chiesa was absolutely outstanding in the first half, hounding, pressing, the whole vibe. He forces the early penalty with a really clever bit of movement. And, Cody Hakpo steps up, grabs the ball, like, I'm going to score here, scores. And he wasn't getting too nice a reception, I don't think, from the old Eindhoven faithful. But, it was what it was. But Liverpool were super deep, but still undone from a long ball twice for the first 2 goals. And look, that's potentially inexperience at the back, but it's an absolutely glorious goal for the first PSV equaliser. Pepe holds up the ball, Bakayoko twists and turns the box and hammers it home. Liverpool take the lead again. Harvey Elliott scores off a rebound from a Federico Chiesa shot, actually. There was a kind of worry that he'd got injured in the build-up to the penalty, but he came back on and looked absolutely fine. So shouts out to Chiesa, because this was much more like it from his perspective. A really, really fun first half, because PSV then equalise in the game. And then just before the half-time whistle goes, Saibari gives them the lead with a brilliant finish, actually. Really, really good. And Liverpool hoping for an offside. It doesn't come. It's really, really impressive in terms of how it works. Saibari, the equaliser, and it's Pepe that scores just before half-time. It's one of those weird ones that takes about 5 deflections, but it does look like they've given it to Pepe. But really, really impressive in terms of the way they went. The equaliser came in the 45th minute. The one that gave PSV the lead was 51st minute, so literally last seconds. And after such a fun first half, it really cooled off in the second. And Liverpool sort of lose their heads a little bit at the end of things. They get a late red card, which is probably indicative of that, just hot heads and young heads in a weird situation with a much changed team. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. Liverpool end up winning this league section of the Champions League. But I thought it was a good run out and a good test for some of the younger Liverpool players who will use that experience going forward. Some nice moments from Chiesa, some nice moments from Harvey Elliott. All of those things are important as they go towards the end of the season, and those players can come on and make a difference and make an impact. So I imagine that Arne Slot will be relatively pleased with the night's work, even if they did end up losing the game. It's just the 3rd game he's lost as Liverpool manager, which is kind of nuts.
He lost, but he still won. I mean, it was the perfect, really, isn't it? If you're going to lose and you still come in top of the Champions League groups, then you've got away with it, and you've given some really important minutes to 5 or 6 youngsters and given them an experience that will bode well for them. Gakpo, he might have started when you wouldn't have expected him to, but he's still off after 50 minutes anyway. Obviously, a double game week for Liverpool coming up, so they want Gakpo as an important part of those 2 games that they've got on the horizon. So, a defeat that in some ways doesn't matter is always nice. Just shows the privilege that they've got at the moment in that club.
Yeah, I think that's where they're at, and it was, I think they will look at that generally as a positive. Like I say, Chiesa being able to come in and make an impact and showing that he's capable of doing so, I think is a major, major plus for Arne Slot, because he's going to have to rotate through the end of this season and be able to utilise players in different ways. And Chiesa stood up and showed he was up to that task, I think, today. So that's a good thing from a Liverpool perspective. Although I do feel a little bit for Amara Nalo, who came off the bench and then got sent off, 18 years old. Not ideal as kind of Champions League debuts go. But alas, he'll get over it. to Bayern. They won 3-1 against Slovan Bratislava. Light work in so many ways. The damage was done in terms of not making the top 8 with last week's defeat. Nice to see Thomas Muller on the score sheet. Midfield 3 of Elise, Thomas Muller and Pavlovic was a pretty bold call in terms of control, but it mostly worked. Matthias Tell in from the start, and I wanted to ask you about this. Is this a message from company to the board and the player that he doesn't want to lose it?
I don't know. I mean, he hasn't been playing him recently, so he should have played him in one of those ones. Then the player wouldn't be annoyed in the first place. That'd probably be one good idea he could have. I mean, it's looking very likely that Tell goes. Everyone was surprised to see him in the starting lineups. Even German reporters were like, "Oh, he's playing." But all I know is that Tottenham are already in talks with Tell. Man United want to have talks with Tell, but haven't been able to do that yet. He obviously was linked with Chelsea, but doesn't want to go to Chelsea. So if Bayern play him here and they say, look, you're going to get more opportunities, then maybe he does a 180 and stays. But he's got to really be sure that he's going to get enough minutes in the bank, because I'm sure ideally he'd rather play for Bayern Munich than Tottenham. But he's got to know that it's coming.
Ask Harry Kane, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, fair enough. I mean, look, to be honest, I don't really know what formation Bayern were playing at the end. Pavlovic sort of dropping into a back 3. At one point, they took off Sasha Bowie, who was playing left back, and brought on, I think it was Serge Gnabry. And I was like, what formation are they playing at this point? It's all very, very strange. Literally no defensive midfielders, which might well be why they conceded, but it didn't really matter anyway. Bayern pretty much set in where they were after that defeat to Feyenoord last week. So job done from a Bayern perspective. Job done too for Real Madrid, who won 3-0 at Brest. Just some more fun from Rodrigo in this competition. Glorious goal coming off the left-hand side. And the question becomes again, is Rodrigo actually best off the left-hand side as well? We know that Mbappe is. We know that Vinicius is. There is probably an argument to suggest that Rodrigo is excellent. But look, his record in the Champions League is absurd. He continually scores goals in this competition, and his opener is brilliant. Like really, really, really good football. So shout out to Rodrigo. Real Madrid got a little bit of a scare here. Brest thought they'd equalise, but it was ruled out for offside. They capitalised on that really well. Nice finish from Bellingham to make it 2-0, and an even better one for Rodrigo's second. Some nice stuff from Los Blancos towards the end. Now it'll be Madrid, could be Madrid against City next, which would be quite wild.
It would be great. Yeah, it would be great. I mean, it should be a Champions League final, and we're getting it as a playoff. So it's these teams are supposed to be in the semi-finals and finals, not playoff matchups. But here we are.
Yeah, here we are. But bad one for Milan. They lost 2-1 to Dinamo Zagreb, who were absolutely gutted because they didn't qualify in the end because of other results going their way. They did what they needed to do. The opener from Martin Baturina, he's been absolutely sensational when he's allowed to play. He scores this with real nice nous to nick it and slot the ball home after Gabbia makes a mistake. But very, very cool and collected for a very talented youngster at this point. So keep an eye on Baturina. There's lots of interest, I know that, around Europe, but he continues to just do his thing for Dinamo Zagreb, and they're unlucky not to qualify because they deserve to win this game. Milan went down to 10. Yunus Musa sent off. No idea what he's doing for the red card. He's already booked. Genuinely baffling. There's cover. Yes, it's a little bit soft, but you don't give them a reason to give that yellow card when the player has turned and is going away from goal. It makes absolutely no sense. Yeah. No idea what he's decided to do at that point. This was a massive game for Milan. And in the first half, they looked so far off the pace. Like they could have qualified. They were in the top 8 before games began today. They looked so far off it. They were better after the break with 10 men. And look, when someone needed to step up once again, it was Christian Pulisic, a brilliant goal for the equaliser from Pulisic, who has proved to be the man that the Milan have looked to this season. I think we're seeing the best version that we've ever seen of Pulisic right now. But then they go ridiculous again. They concede straight away. Really strange moment for the Dinamo second. Milan keep falling behind, and there will be question marks about their character. Conceição has already spoken out about it, and I thought it was interesting hearing what he was talking about before the game. He was criticising his players because 48 hours before this fixture, they went out to a concert. Like they went out to see Lazza, who is a Milanese rapper. Like a big group of the squad all went out to see him. And he was like, this is just not what I expect. We've got a massive game in the Champions League in 2 days' time and they're all out at a gig. as I thought was quite an interesting kind of development, considering that he'd been fighting with his club captain at the weekend and then calling out his players publicly for going to gigs before their Champions League. But like, I mean, he's got a point, right? Like, one, the lack of character and lack of heads to actually go and concede after you've worked so hard to drag yourself back into the game. But two, this continual knack of falling behind is really starting to hurt Milan, and he's going to be absolutely tearing his hair out that he can't work this out in terms of a mentality thing and see what happens next. So I think interesting times at Milan.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, as you say, the red card seemed a bit brainless, and he was so annoyed with himself at the time. It's just a frustrating night, isn't it, for Milan? And they've got a lot to overcome in this second half of the season. And this was one of those nights where you saw that frustrating side to him.
Yeah, 100%. Over the other side of the city, Inter have no such problems. 3-0 against Monaco. All the goals scored by Lautaro, but the first two, both brilliant from Marcus Thuram. First, he draws the penalty, then he draws a red card. He was way too explosive for Monaco's defence. It was such an assured performance from Inter. Granted, it was against 10 men, but they were in complete control from the get-go. Lautaro is so alert for the hat-trick goal. It's such sharp thinking to tuck that one home and be the first man off the mark. Great stuff from El Toro. They conceded, Dean, 1 goal in 8 league games. That is ridiculous numbers for probably the best defence in Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. It is ridiculous. Lautaro, we haven't heard his name too much recently. There's been other people like stealing the limelight across Europe, but Lautaro just keeps digging away. Even like the way that he took that first goal, it's just so instinctive and predatory and ruthless, and I just love like this. Once you get to this level of football and those big players stand up and like make those big moments count. Obviously, you know what you're getting defensively, but when you're reminded of like that, knowing where the goal is, like it's priceless. It is priceless at this level, and they have to have a chance of actually going on to win this competition. They'll be looking around at the moment, looking at that league table, and thinking, "Why not? Why can't it be us?"
Yeah, 100%. Like, as I said before, I think there's sort of 9-10 teams in play in real terms, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see how they shake out. But Inter will fear absolutely nobody. With this defence as good as it is, with the depth of the squad as good as it is, like I think that they will look at this as a real opportunity to right what they see as a wrong that happened 2 years ago, considering the way that final played out. So yeah, lots to like about Inter. I thought they were very, very good here, and Lautaro getting a hat-trick, very much the cherry on the top of the cake. But there's so much to like about them, and Petar Sucic potentially joining as well. I spoke about that on the Postbox Extra on our Patreon earlier today. I think that's a very, very smart signing, and they just keep making these clever little moves that continue to revamp and refresh the squad and push through different players. You know, they're bringing in a player who is potentially one of those Çalhanoğlu long-term replacements, but who can also play in the 8 roles in front of him to get him settled in the team. It's just smart business, and they keep doing it at Inter. So lots to like about them, but yeah, they're genuine contenders for this competition. Dortmund won 3-1 against Shakhtar Donetsk. Serge Girassi loves the Champions League, doesn't he? First for Stuttgart, now for Dortmund. He's got 9 goals in the last 2 seasons. I have no idea. They're 2-0 up, Dortmund. They have no problems whatsoever. And then Gregor Kerbel just does an absolute dummy. Like he gets tackled basically on the goal line and Shakhtar score. A real muddle up, which is very Borussia Dortmund right now. But in a non-Borussia Dortmund moment, they go and seal the deal. And considering this club currently doesn't have really any direction, it doesn't have any leadership, there is no manager being put in. It looks like it might be Niko Kovac, but nobody is sure at this point. It's a glorious finish from Ben Spaini to get the third. Like, dances through the Shakhtar defence, sits down the goalkeeper and chips him. Just really, really good. So nice to see that. And a big win for Dortmund, who'd been really treading water for a couple of weeks since Nuri Sahin departed. Bad day for Juventus. They lost 2-0 to Benfica. Vangelis Pavlidis loves this competition, man. Hat-trick last week, goal today to get the opener. He's really starting to cook a little bit there. So that chariot full of fire, if you will, from Vangelis, which is nice. But I was worried about Benfica here because I thought if they'd lost, they would have been out. And actually, I think that I'm correct on that. If they had lost, they would have been out. But they just were comfortable in this. There's a great goal from Orkan Kökçü to seal it. Lovely low strike from the edge of the box. But another really disappointing result for Juventus in this competition. They missed out on seeding here by losing this game. Just really not good enough. And after they looked like they turned a corner in that Milan game where I thought they, for the first time, we saw a bit of what Thiago Motta was trying to do. Now, there are problems. Obviously, Cambiasso absent at the moment because he's talking this move to Manchester City. The moment Motta's basically saying he's recovering from an ankle injury, but I don't think anybody believes that to be the case right now. But it's all come crashing down, since that point. And that was their most complete performance under Thiago Motta. And suddenly you're like, since then, we've now seen a couple of losses and some really disappointing results in the Champions League as well. They might have just about got away with it because they're going to get Milan or PSV next, who are, PSV are a very good side. And I think have more to offer than people often give them credit for. But Juventus will still fancy that as an opportunity. And we've seen, them beat PSV in this competition, even when there's been more on the line than this. And they've recently outplayed and outclassed Milan. So they might get away with it a little bit. But I still think there's some real disappointment after it looked like Juve had turned a corner.
Yeah, they've won 1 in 8, so I don't think they've turned a corner yet. And I think that they've still got a lot to prove across this season. They want to invest in this team further, but that's one of the only reasons that they're opening to selling Cambiasso, because they want a lot of money for him. So that opens some doors to them actually rejuvenating this squad. And I think you can see that they need it. I don't feel like that much has to change here, but there's just needs this energy switch or something that needs to go their way. They've to finish 20th in the Champions League. They could look at it and be like, it's fine, we've got to the playoffs. But that's really disappointing, I think, especially when you look at the other teams that have finished above them. It kind of summed up exactly where they've been this season. They've been very mid.
Yeah, they have been very mid. You're absolutely right. I think that's how you would describe a team that draws almost every game it plays. But
definition of.
They are just mid. But I do have faith in the Juventus project. I do have faith in Thiago Motta to turn this around. But equally, this looked really bad. And I don't think it's a major coincidence that it coincided with the return of Dusan Vlahovic up front, right? He really struggled again. And they've looked better when they've played Nico Gonzalez through there. They'll look better when Randall Colomawani comes into those areas. I think he's going to do a bit of both in terms of playing as a 9 and playing off that left flank. But I think that they are crying out for that. And the fact that Colomwani scored on his debut is probably bad news for Dusan Vlahovic at this point. Leverkusen, very comfortable, 1-2-0 against Sparta Prague, ended up 6th in the table. So they're straight through to the round of 16. They scored, Dean, the most last season Leverkusen goal of all time. Frimpong just went absolutely careering down the right, pulled it back, and Florian Wirtz slot home the ball back. I was like, I've seen this before. Yeah. I've seen that goal before. So it's nice to see Leverkusen doing bits from last year's all-conquering season. Nathan Teyer puts the icing on the cake, ices their spot in the top 8. 5 wins, 1 draw, 2 losses. I think they'll fancy themselves as well. We talk about Atalanta and potentially being out of the Serie A title race. Leverkusen are not out of the Bundesliga title race. They're 6 points back. But I do think that that's a big ask from this point. And they will look at this competition and think, yeah, you know what? We got to the final of a European competition last year. We were probably slightly too good for most of the teams in that competition. They will look at Atalanta, who are their ultimate conquerors in that, and think, well, if they think they can get all the way, then there's no reason we shouldn't be. And I think that, considering where they're at, considering the way that they play, that it might just suit games where other teams come and try and dominate the ball against them. Now, I know that they lost 4-0 at Anfield. I haven't forgotten that. But I think that this team have got much better in the months kind of after that. And what we saw with that run of excellent performances is that this team are growing back into themselves a little bit. And I'm intrigued to see where they go in the back half of this season.
Yeah, look, they've only there's only a few teams that have managed to do better than them in terms of wins in this league. Bayer Leverkusen have gone on to finish 6th in this phase of the Champions League, and they've picked up 5 from 8 games, so they've got 5 wins along the way. And only Atleti, Inter, Arsenal, Barcelona, and Liverpool have managed to top that. So when you're a team of the size and status that Bayer Leverkusen are, even to just make the automatics is really impressive. But to be that close to those elite teams is even more impressive.
Yeah. Look, talking of teams who it's been very, very impressive to get straight into that round of 16, Lille, who ended up 7th, and they did so in fine
I just
style.
love the celebrations here, mate. I just loved I saw the ending and it was just amazing. It was like they'd won the whole thing. It was incredible, and they kind of have.
They've been so impressive, in this run and in this kind of league stage. They've beaten Real Madrid, they have beaten Atletico Madrid, and they have now thumped Feyenoord 6-1 in the final day. it was a lot of fun, this game, right? Really open, stretched out nicely as it went along. Feyenoord a little bit silly in the way that they left space for Lille to occupy. But, they still had to go and do that. And they did so in such fine style, like a lovely opening goal from them, beautifully worked. And they get pegged back. And instead of going back into their shell, a point might well have been enough for Lille, right? And instead of that, they come out and they open the game up beautifully. And what you see as kind of a response to that is this absolute demolition job that they go out with. And I thought that Sahraoui was sublime. Like he got a goal, he got a couple of assists, he forced the own goal as well. Just a really, really impressive performance from him. But also I wanted to shout out the goal that Jonathan David scores. I don't know if you've seen this yet, but it's a proper brilliant number 9 goal. Some great footwork, great strength, then curls a beauty into the corner. There is going to be so much demand for him if he ends this season and he hasn't signed a new contract.
Well, I've heard of where he's already going, so I think if it's true, we're in for a nice surprise at the end of the season.
Okay, well, I won't push you too hard.
We'll reveal it on Patreon. Go and sign up.
Okay, well, there you go. It'll go on the next Transfers from Paradise. So make sure you're tuned in. Link to the Patreon, as ever, in the description. Look, Lille ran riot. Final fell apart. Remy Cabella still scoring absolute bits. And also, the way that they scored 2 goals in like 2 minutes to ice this, to make it 6-1, and make sure that goal difference really did force them into the top 8 conversation. Brilliant. Like, absolutely amazing. I was really impressed. And Lille are going to be a lot of fun as we go through this tournament. So, yeah, keep an eye on them going forward. Atletico, right? 4-1 against RB Salzburg. Giuliano Simeone tore Salzburg apart in the first 15 minutes. Ridiculous. Scores 1, sets up the second with this unbelievable touch around the keeper and squares it for Griezmann, who then kills the tie with his second just before half time, and Llorente adds a 4th. That Salzburg scored a really good goal, like a brilliant goal at the end of this game, like 91st minute. They'd done more than enough to deserve, but in so many ways, this was men against boys, and Atleti just had way, way, way too much, comfortably into the round of 16. But nice to see them playing like this, open and free, and really going at teams, because when they did this in the first half, they were kind of irresistible.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of the goals from it yet. I've just seen a picture of Simeone with a big grin on his face as his son scores. So
it's a great goal, and then but the assist for the second might be even better, which is great vibes. And look, it was a really big time stepping up to the mark performance from Giuliano Simeone. So shout out to him.
Yeah, I mean, not just shouts out, like that is actually incredible to have a dad and a son playing at Atletico Madrid together. Like,
well, we've seen it once before, not at Atleti, but obviously at Porto with Chico Conceição and Sergio Conceição.
Yeah, it's so rare, because not only have you got to be so good as the player to live up to your dad's reputation, but your dad then has to get to the level as a coach that he can be at a club of that stature, but then also be confident enough in his son that he's good enough that this isn't just like, oh, I'm going to put my son on here. And
you have to almost be better than everybody else, or you're never ever getting over the nepotism accusations, 100%. Right? Like you almost like the criticism is going to come down harder from your father, I'd imagine, than anybody else. So you've got to like be better than everybody else in order to put yourself in there. And Giuliano Simeone has instilled himself as an absolute mainstay of this Atleti team. It's really impressive.
It's just like, but for this moment on this like Champions League madness night, like it's such a big occasion, I bet, for that fan. I know Simeone is like 22 now, so it's not like he's a kid, but still, like when you see the pictures, it's just like, yeah, like that is actually pretty wild. That's so cool.
It's also worth pointing out that, like, obviously Gio Simeone, who was also at one point under his dad, he was like, nah, he's not good enough. And like, he's playing for Napoli. Like, he's pretty good, right? And he just decided, he was like, nah, nowhere near good enough for me. And, you know, he's now top of Serie A. So that's how good Giuliano Simeone is, right?
They've got some good DNA, that family.
Yeah, they do indeed. I mean, look, the last game that had anything riding on it was Sporting 1, Bologna 1, which meant that Sporting did squeeze into the playoff round. Bologna score first. It's a bit of a stupid goal to concede from Sporting's perspective. It takes a few deflections, but they really, really need to get better at defending set pieces. Bologna took a bit of a body blow, injury to Lewis Ferguson, who's been a key part of their mini resurgence. But I would say this about Sporting, because at 1-0 down and looking like they're going out of the competition in a moment of real jeopardy, they rally. And it's a really, really important goal from Conrad Harder, who's in for Gyökeres up top, that sends them through. It's a bit of a scrappy goal in that it bounced off both his legs before going in. But they don't give up. They work it really well out to the wings. Giovanni Kender's out there, as Shimaus as well. And the ball comes back in and Harder forces it home. That's important because I think that there's been obviously a lot of talk about Gyökeres. There is a high chance he's not there next season. And in Conrad Harder, they have someone ready to go who's going to take on from that. Look, I'm still think there's quite a lot of work to do with Sporting. They don't look comfortable in this four at the back yet, but it's a big change of pace where they've been for a number of years. And I'm really not sure about playing Zeno de Bast in central midfield. That doesn't look like an experiment that's really working for Hojbjerg, but look, we'll see how things go going forward.
Yeah.
But they got the job done, and that was really important, I think, considering there have been questions already about how this is going to work, about the fact that the coach has changed away from the system that had done so well. Yes, they're 6 points clear at the top of the Primera, but it hasn't felt very like smooth sailing, I think, from any perspective. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see how that one goes forward. But good character, good heart to bounce back into this one. And the Alvalade very relieved at the end of this game rather than joyous, a bit like the Etihad in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, they've got half a chance of getting through the playoffs too. It's not the best set up fixtures.
If they get Borussia Dortmund, they will fancy that. I think if they get
Atalanta's a tough one, obviously, but you got 50-50 there. And if you end up with Dortmund, then I think you think, okay, like we're about the same level as them, surely. They're flaky, Dortmund. We all know that. We'll see, mate. We'll see how that draw comes out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the other two games that happened tonight, Sturm Graz beat RB Leipzig 1-0. This game had nothing riding on it, obviously, but still there's something very weird going on at Leipzig. Scrappy goal ends up winning this game, but just not enough from a Leipzig team that has this amount of talent. And I wonder, Dean, if this is the kind of thing that makes players like Benjamin Šeško, that makes players like Lois Openda, Antonio Nusa, Christoph Baumgartner, who all featured tonight, consider their options. I don't know, but it's really not good. And it doesn't feel like it's moving forward in any way. They've been deeply, deeply embarrassing in this competition.
Wow. You don't often rip people apart. You don't normally feel too strong.
They've been tosh. They really, really have been bad. And I'm really, really disappointed in this group of Leipzig players and their manager that they haven't been able to make a better go at this, because you look at some of the performances we've seen from teams you would consider to be in a class below Leipzig, and it's not like Leipzig had an absolutely brutal draw, or they would have looked at a load of those games and thought that's very, very difficult. Yeah, they had a couple of tough games. So did everyone. Like, it wasn't like they had the Benfica draw. Benfica have qualified despite having the most difficult draw in the entire competition, right? So that's major credit to them. Leipzig didn't have that, and they have fallen by the wayside. I'm really, really disappointed in them.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they've lost. They did beat Sporting, so that's probably.
They were already out at that point.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? It was done.
Exactly. And when you consider the way that it all started off for them, they just failed to ever get any momentum through this season. There was never really any hope once the season started that things were really getting going. I can't even find, I'm just quickly flicking through their fixtures, see if they've ever won like more than 2 games on the bounce. I'm not sure that they even have, to be honest, since the start of the season. So, yeah, you're not going to get through a competition like this with that sort of form. Such a good squad, such a good even like starting.
Such a good squad.
It's such a good 11 as well. Like the 11 that they're capable of putting out there. If you were to like do a garage sale and be like, who wants to buy some of our players? They're like, we don't need them anymore. Like, very quickly, 5 or 6 of them would be picked off immediately by top clubs.
Top clubs as well, yeah, 100%. But like, this is what I mean. If Benjamin Šeško, if this Arsenal interest is legitimate, and I don't know if that is for this window or whatever, but if you're Benjamin Šeško and you're thinking, okay, I gave you my word that I was going to stay for another year, but you have not been able to show me any of the quality that would make me want to stick around, I would be reconsidering my position, and he will not be the only one in that squad unless something changes pretty quick.
Yeah, even people like Vermeeren, to be honest, are like...
Well, that one's just been made permanent.
Just been made permanent, and I'm just like, just strange. It's just like, this team's just not living up to the levels expected, and you see in these recent years, them getting these good transfers like that Vermeeren one, and just like... You've got to keep that up, because otherwise people are going to lose faith in what has been so special about you. And you've been basically a a platform that people can succeed on, but also get thrown into the next stratosphere of elitism. And people might have doubts about that in the future if this team starts to fall apart.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. The 18th, the final game was between Young Boys and Red Star Belgrade, who were both eliminated as well. Great goal from Red Star. They won this 1-0 from Guelo Kanga. Yeah, absolute corker of a goal. I mean, look, shouts out to Sven Zvejda, to Red Star, because they've worked really hard in this league stage and they deserve some credit. 2 wins, one against Stuttgart, one tonight. They finished above Leipzig and Salzburg. Like, really no disgrace from them. And they were seen as one of the weaker teams in the competition. Yes, the Maracanã can be a difficult place to go, especially in the snow, as PSV found out last week in that 3-2 win. But I think they've given a decent account of themselves and they can hold their heads up high in a way that the Leipzig very much cannot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I liked seeing the goal. It was like such a enlightening moment, obviously, in a game that nobody really had any interest in looking at. It's a belter. But yeah, Young Boys, they've ended with 0 points, them and Slovan Bratislava. That's really sad that they haven't been able to get a single point out of 8 games. And I thought that this is one thing that might be eliminated from this type of football. I thought surely everyone will get like the chance to at least be competitive down the bottom end of it, but no.
To be fair, Young Boys are having an absolutely god-awful season across the board, right? Like, they've been dreadful in the Champions League, as you can see from that nil point element of it, but they're also 9th in a 12-team Swiss Super League. This is a team that won the division last year, and they're currently they're going to be in the relegation playoffy bit rather than the championship playoff bit. Like, there are 8 teams in front of them. They've been so poor across the board, pretty much all of it. And, they've changed managers already this season. It just doesn't feel like anything's going their way. And so if they can't compete domestically, you'd look at it and think they're probably going to struggle to compete on a European stage as well. And that has very much been the case.
Yeah, they're playing like boys and not men. That's the problem, mate.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's bad.
And with
bad.
that,
Sorry.
Well, that's it. Like, on that bombshell, I think it's probably time for us to call it a day. So thank you very, very much for listening to Champions League Takeaway for the last time in the league stages. We'll have this show back again as those playoffs kick off in a couple of weeks. But for now, thank you very much to Mr. Dean Jones.
Cheers, mate.
I've been Jack Collins. This has been Champions League Takeaway. There will be a Truth coming out on Friday where Sam and Doogie and myself are talking all about Bournemouth and Nottingham Forest and what has sparked such good seasons for both of them in the Premier League this time out. So make sure you lock in for that first thing Friday morning. That will be released. But for now, from us, thank you so much for listening and we'll see you very shortly, Rank Squad. Take it easy. Peace.